million people occupy the square for most of it. And initially, they did receive widespread support from people. But toward the end, what I noticed was the sentiment started to shift. Because in the beginning, the demand were basics. The demand were cracking down on official corruption, and the government need to do something to control the inflation. That was the biggest demand in the beginning, because there was this was a time when China was transitioning from a command economy to a market economy. So what they did was liberalizing the price regime, for example, because before prices all fixed, the state fixed the price for everything. So part of the market reform is to lift the price control. And what happened is it did spark very rapid inflation all across the country, and that affected mostly urban dwellers, because for the longest time, people, again, I'm gonna go back a little bit in history. During Mao era, China had a command economy. How it works is the farmers, they have to sell their crops to the state at a state mandated price. So what essentially state is setting a very low price for the agricultural product, taking it from the farmers, and they're taking the profit to subsidize the industrial development in the cities, to subsidize the cities, city workers. And this is because at that time, China in the 50s, it went through first round of industrialization. But then what happened is then everybody want to go to the cities, because in the cities, if you work in a factory, you're guaranteed lifetime employment. It's called iron rice ball. Once you work in a factory, you can expect it to work there until you retire, and you're covered. Your healthcare, childcare, everything is provided for by the factory. But China cannot provide that kind of lifestyle for everyone. It has limited resources, so it can only provide for that about 20% of the people who live in the cities. So what that means is 80% of the Chinese peasants who live in the countryside, they're subsidizing all these workers who live in the cities, right? Yeah. So China had a two-track system, and to enforce this, they have what's called hukou, residential registration. So you are tied to the place of your birth. So if you're born in the countryside, you can't relocate to the cities. Where opportunities are, where there's better paying jobs, where there's state provided welfare system. But they would not allow you to move. They're like, no, you got to stay put and produce food, and then we'll buy food from you at artificially low prices, and then we will take the profit to subsidize to provide for the welfare of the cities. So that system was being dismantled in 1980s under Deng Xiaoping, under the market reform. We are now finally seeing the latest iteration of that, because China this year, they just announced they're getting rid of the hukou system. So there's no longer restriction on movement from countryside to cities. Even though for the past decades, a lot of migrant farmers have traveled from countryside to cities, but in the cities, because it lacks the city hukou, the city resident registration, their children cannot go to school. They cannot get the state subsidized, the city subsidized healthcare. So essentially they're kind of underclass, even within China. They're kind of like the Mexicans of China, if you think about it. They're the Chinese peasants were like the Mexicans in China. They come into the cities, they do all the manual labor, but they're denied all the benefits. They just dismantled the hukou system this year. Now, in the 1980s, they started to change. They started to dismantle the iron rice ball system. Well, they didn't dismantle the iron rice ball system right away. But what they did, they start to hire contract workers from the countryside. So they allow young peasant boys to get off the farms to work in the cities, and they're paid by contract, which means they still don't have the same access to the same welfare system the city folks have access to, but at least they're getting paid. At least they're getting paid wages. And but when they started to so one part of the lifting the price control is to allow farmers, instead of mandating them to sell their produce to the state at artificially low prices, to allow farmers to sell their produce on open market. That had encouraged agricultural productivity in the 1980s. Like the Chinese agricultural productivity in 1980s skyrocketed. Mm-hmm. And because the farmers now have an incentive to produce more food, instead of having all their surplus getting taken away by the state at a lowly set artificial price, for the first time, they can, if they produce more, they can make more money. But that impacted the city dwellers. That impacted all the factory workers, because previously they lived on state subsidized food, welfare, everything. And now with the price liberalization, they have to pay market price. And their wages are not rising at the same pace as the rising prices. So there was a lot of popular discontent within the cities about the inflation. That's another problem is the two-track system. So originally, during the command economy, the government set prices for everything. But when China started to liberalize, it started introducing market economy. The old state-owned enterprise they're still there. So essentially, you end up with two-tier system. The state-owned enterprise, they still work on state-mandated prices, and often set very low. State set very low prices for raw materials, so the state-owned enterprises could have access to. And then there's a market economy flourishing beside it. With private enterprise start flourishing. So what happened is people like, for example, factory managers who are in certain position of power, they can do price arbitrage. They take those they take those resources that the state has set low prices for, that's set aside for the state-owned enterprise, and they turn around and sell it at the market price, and then make immense profit. And this is where the official corruption comes in. So this was the two biggest complaint in the late 1980s. First, runaway inflation and official corruption. So that was the main demands of the protester in the beginning. And this is why also they received a lot of popular support at the time, because a lot of the urban dwellers in China was experiencing the same. But towards the end of the protest, like I remember, because I live on the campus of Chongqing University in Chongqing, and the students, they took over the broadcasting radio station in the university, so they were broadcasting whatever they want for a couple of months, and around late May and early June, they start broadcasting stuff like "Down with Deng Xiaoping," down with the government. It was like, whoa, that escalated pretty quickly. Like now you went from like protesting about inflation and corruption to like regime change, right? I mean, like, so I don't know exactly what happened. I was 13 years old, right? I was a kid, so I don't know. But I'm just telling you my observation as a kid.
Basically, something changed. That went up, like that escalated real quick.
Yeah, I'm just telling you what I observed as a 13-year-old kid living in a Chinese university at the time, right? Because all the Chinese university were a hotbed of activism. So I just noticed, like, toward the end of May, early June, the whole sentiment the whole demand from the student protester changed. You went from demanding end to official to corruption, and inflation to Deng Xiaoping must step down.
He must go.
Yeah, Deng Xiaoping must go.
He must
go. And then that was also coincided with a time when finally, after Tiananmen Square had been occupied by 1 million people for over a month, the government declared martial law and they ordered the troops to come in. The reason they ordered troops to come in is because initially they tried to send in unarmed policemen to clear the square, but they were overwhelmed because there's 1 million people. There's 1 million people in the square. Unarmed policemen ain't gonna do shit. And so then the decision was it was made behind the closed door, among the elders at the time, including Deng Xiaoping, to send in the army. But the army was held up just outside of Beijing by the citizens for several weeks. By the way, all this was broadcasted live on Chinese state media at the time, CCTV. So even I was a 13-year-old kid in Chongqing. I turn on TV, I can see, the army trucks getting stopped and the citizens are interacting with them, telling them, don't go to the city, don't go to Beijing, don't head to Beijing. Well, you also have to understand, at the time, there's also a sort of power struggle at the top. The Politburo at the time was split on what to do about the student protest. The split was so even that Deng Xiaoping was the one that broke. He cast a tiebreaker. Deng Xiaoping was brought in to do the tiebreaker. So this is why all the events leading up to June 3rd was broadcast live on Chinese state TV. So we all saw that.
So when Rubio is arguing, this won't be silenced. The censorship won't continue.
How old is Rubio? How old is Marco Rubio?
Oh, I don't think. Look, I don't
the only thing Rubio knows is what he reads from Western media. I'm telling you, as a Chinese person who speaks the language, who grew up in China, who experienced it, was in China during the Tiananmen protest movement. I was telling you my experience, my observation as a 13-year-old.
I'm saying Rubio knows dick about this. That's my point. That he is making this art, as you point out, he's going back 37 years. And what was going on in the U.S. at the time, civil rights struggles, as I pointed out beforehand, we've been overthrowing governments, South American kill squads, meaning the U.S. is not in a position to talk, which is the point that I'm trying to make in this case.
Okay, so Rubio is a little bit older than me. He's about 5 years older than me. He's about my sister's age. But still, I don't think he speak any Chinese. I don't think he understand what's going on inside China at that time. So anyway, I'm again, I wasn't in Beijing. I was in Chongqing, but I was watching this on TV, and then on June 4th. So June 4th, suddenly what happened was no, or was it the night of June 3rd? So the broadcast was cut off. There was no television for the rest of the day from the late afternoon of June 3rd. So that was very odd. So the whole nation was glued to television to find out what's going on in Japan, whether the army is going to go inside the city or not, because they had been stymied for a couple of weeks just outside the city. And this is summer. It's very hot, right? At the time, it's very hot. And then suddenly, June 3rd, the broadcast was cut off around late afternoon, and the broadcast wasn't restored until next morning. I think not even next morning, like next day in June 4th. And when the TV broadcast came back on, they say there has been a counter-revolutionary riot inside the capital in Beijing, and the People's Liberation Army has cleared the square. So that's what we have been told. And but then they also broadcast the students leaving the square. So apparently there was a negotiation between the. Okay, let me bridge the gap a little bit. The violence that did happen happened on the night of June 3rd. So in June 3rd, the command, I guess, was finally sent for the army to go in, which has been sitting outside of Beijing for a couple of weeks in their trucks. And then the violence broke out. We don't exactly know how the violence broke out, but the shooting started about 5 kilometers from the Tiananmen Square itself. Tiananmen Square is where most of the students, protesters were camped out, but there were the citizens were erecting a lot of roadblocks to blocking the armies from coming in. And the army has been sitting outside the city for a few weeks. And then June 3rd, this is what I gathered after many years, pieced together from watching different documentary, different interviews, different footage, etc. On the night of June 3rd, as the army make its way into the city, violence broke out. There were shootings. There was report of snipers on the roof shooting at the marching PLA columns. So and the troops returned fire. So we know the high-rise building around Muxidi, this at the exactly 5 kilometers from the square. We know like people were getting shot in those apartment buildings. There were bullet holes on those apartments. But then there's also a rumor saying there were snipers posted on the roof from there shooting at the troops, and the troops returned fire. And then this is now I'm going to tell you what we have been told by Western reporters who were also present there. The photographer who took the famous Tank Man photo, he was interviewed actually about what happened. He said he saw armored personnel carrier was getting stopped, and people pour gas, throw Molotov cocktail on it, pour gasoline on it, set it on fire, and the tank driver, the personal APC drivers came out, and they got lynched by the mobs. And the photographer himself was knocked out. He said he was attacked. He didn't specify who he was attacked. He said he was attacked. Their camera were knocked down, but he described the PLA soldiers that climbed out of the armored personnel carrier that was lit on fire was lynched by the mob. And later, the Chinese state did release pictures of the soldiers who have been burned, with their like intestines falling out, and one corpse of the soldier was hanged by his neck from a bridge. So, but we don't. The thing is, we don't know who opened fire first, what triggered the open fire, but there was violence, and the army did open fire, and this happened around. Again, around about 5 kilometers from the square where most of the people are. And at that time, there were a lot of buses that were being used to block the road, to block the tanks from coming in, the tanks and personal carriers. And people can find it on the internet. They actually can find the footage of those armored personnel vehicle and tank got lit on fire. They can also find photos of rows of tanks being burned to a husk during Tiananmen Square protests. And so there was violence. People were get caught in crossfire. There is a group called Tiananmen Mothers. They are the mothers who have lost their kids during the Tiananmen protest, and they all connected with each other, collected names. So altogether, there's about 200. They got about 200 names. They 200 names of the people who were killed. So we know that the civilian death is about 200. This was collected by the Tiananmen Mothers, confirmed that, and the death from the PLA soldiers is about a dozen. Is about a dozen. So this is what we know. So a dozen troops were killed. About 200 people, protesters or whether bystanders, were also killed. And much of the violence happened as the army was pushing into the city. But by the time the army arrived at the Tiananmen Square, the leader of the leader of the protest actually fled. But now the remaining self-designated leader, including a Taiwanese singer Hou Dejian, and also Liu Xiaobo, the man who was awarded Nobel Peace Prize by the West, they went to negotiate it with the army commander who were coming in. And so the result of negotiation is the people who were still camped out of the square. At that time, it's no longer 1 million. It's maybe like, but still more than tens of thousands of people were still there.
Yeah.
So the students around 4 o'clock in the morning on June 4th, 1989, they evacuate. They agreed with the commander demand to evacuate the square. So the violence did not happen at the square. Like, this is one of the kind of the people argue about whether there was a massacre. Okay, there was no massacre at the Tiananmen Square itself, but there was shootings on the way to the square, about 5 kilometers away from the square, on the outskirts. And there were about 200 people killed that we know of, that we have verified names of. So this is what went on. And
this is the reality of it, as opposed to
and Deng Xiaoping himself gave a speech to the PLA commanders on June 9th, 1989. The speech was actually also broadcasted. By the way, the Tank Man footage, the Tank Man footage itself was broadcasted on Chinese state TV. I saw that as a 13-year-old in China in 1989. I watched the Tank Man footage, but it was it was done as part of the state-made documentary. I don't know how many people saw the entirety of the Tank Man footage. So the dude actually interacted with the tank driver for like a couple minutes. The whole footage is like a several minute long. He blocks the tank trying to go around him, and he will move his position to continue to block the tank. At one point, he climbed on the tank, and then he started having a conversation with the tank driver. The tank driver actually got out, sticks her head out. So the two had a conversation with the tank man on the tank, having a conversation with the tank driver. But eventually, he got on. He got out, and he's still trying to block the tank. And a group of passerby rush by and pull him away, and the tank was able to move. So that is the full. So the tank man was not crushed by tanks. A lot of people just assume, they saw the picture, they just assume like he got flattened into pancakes.
Oh, I see. The insinuation was that the tank driver just basically hit the guy. No, I saw the full. In fact, I will pull up the full footage just so people would know what we're talking about. Just to be clear, though, was this a regime change operation? I mean, because it sounds like a color revolution. That's what it sounds like. This idea that
this is hotly debated. So what we do, what the CIA themselves claim. CIA said, no, it's not us. We didn't do it. We only provided some marginal help by providing them with fax machines, help them with communication, and we also organized this operation called Yellowbird. To smuggle out all the top student leaders. Why did they call it Yellowbird? It's kind of racist. But anyway, they call it Operation Yellowbird to smuggle all the top student leaders to Hong Kong. And so that's publicly acknowledged CIA involvement. And there was also a famous interview of the main student leader Cai Lin just few days before the final crackdown, and she was in a hotel room and she was crying, and she said, "Oh, the students don't understand, like they don't understand what our eventual goal is, and I don't have the heart to tell them. I told them to stay in the square, do not leave. But I don't have the heart to tell what our true purpose is." He said, "Our true purpose is to see blood flow. We, he said, to the price of democracy, price for freedom, it must be water with blood, the blood of the patriots. And it's only when there's bloodshed that will wake up the Chinese people to the nature of this government. So we must stay in the square until there is bloodshed." And this interview was aired much later after the incident was over, and Cai Lin became infamous for that because because during that interview he was asked by the Western interviewers, like, "Are you gonna remain in the square with the student?" She said, "No, I'm too important for." I'm important. I'm too important to die. But that's a price I'm willing to pay for the rest of them. Some of you may die, but it's okay because that's the price you pay for freedom.
I'm far too important to die for freedom. Oh, that is, it's wild. It's like when you hear like Martin Luther King saying, "I may not make it to the promised land with you." He's effectively making the point of, I'm going to die for freedom. In her case, she's like, no.
Yeah.
You all need to.
She got a full ride. She got a full ride to either Princeton or Yale after that. After she got smuggled out by the CIA, and then later she became an investment banker and became a born again evangelical Christian. And she married some Republican dude. In US.
That is amazing. No, we don't get to see that part of the video. Part of the video is not shown, right? That's the hint.
I posted it on my Twitter profile, so people can go check out the Cai Lin interview, the infamous Cai Lin interview. Like she remained like one of the most hated figure, whether by, doesn't matter like whether Chinese dissident or a Chinese government supporter, they all hate her because, God, man, how can you? It's just, I mean, it's one thing to be so selfish, another thing to like publicly say it loud. But anyway, so
such a narcissist that you don't even realize what you're saying aloud. Like, that's pretty mind-blowing. Like, the idea that a leader of a, quote, resistance that is fighting for, quote, freedom, and your response is, "Yeah, you guys need to die for me." This was, in fact, this is on your account, Carl.
Yeah. So this is actually sped up because this is more than 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So this is the footage is sped up, but you can see it shows most of the interaction, the tank man with the driver. So he climbs onto the tank, and then he starts to have a conversation with the tank crew inside. So by the way, we saw this. This was shown on Chinese television, on Chinese state media, because the Chinese government spin on this is, look at our disciplined PLA tank commanders. He's trying to be reasonable with this guy. He's trying to do his most not to harm a citizen. I mean, that's how it was positioned by the Chinese official media.
And of course, the people take him away. So he
Yeah.
wasn't
So
necessarily crushed by the tank, as
no,
people
he
try to
was
imply.
not crushed by the tank. I
Okay, we got
have an interview of Tiding on my Twitter profile too, if you can find it. So
Yeah, let me
because
find it.
it has to be seen to be believed. I mean, it's like when I first watched it, it was included in a American produced documentary called "The Gate of Heavenly Peace," which I thought is pretty balanced. It did interview on all sides, and including that infamous sighting interview. And I would recommend for people who want to further understand Tiananmen Square protests to watch the Gate of Heavenly Peace. But with caveat, because I think that documentary was produced with the money from Ford Foundation. So take is what you will. But
Yeah.
but still, I think it's compared to the other Western media coverage of that event. I think the Gate of Heavenly Peace documentary is probably the most balanced. And the Tiding interview was included in that. So I don't know if you found it yet.
I'm looking for it. Yeah, I'm looking for it now.
Yeah. And I
I'm
also
curious.
posted the speech of Deng Xiaoping given on June 9th to PLA commander, and I subtitled it in English because it was in China. It was Deng Xiaoping was speaking in Sichuanese. So it has Chinese subtitles, so Chinese people can read it. So I put it English subtitle, so you can see how Deng Xiaoping views the event. I mean, Deng Xiaoping definitely view it as a color revolution. But
I'm curious on something else.
Yeah.
There was you mentioned that Gorbachev was there at the time, and people were like, why can't we have Gorbachev? Then there's I don't know if it's true or not, that Deng Xiaoping, when he was, after talking to Gorbachev, he came away saying that guy's incompetent or that guy's an idiot. Basically thinking to himself that
this was according to Deng Xiaoping's official translator.
Okay, so he did say.
Deng Xiaoping's official translator said Deng Xiaoping took a look at Gorbachev and said, "This guy may look smart, but he's an idiot."
Yeah, it's like he's going to get a lot of people hurt with what he's trying to do. Is this the interview that you're referring to?
No. So this is actually an interview with a student leader who remained on the square, who negotiated the deal with the PLA to have the student evacuate. So they're basically saying there's no massacre at the square. This is both the Taiwanese. I post a lot. I'm a prolific shipper.
No, I was glad. Video looks hilarious.
Yeah. Just.
Oh, is this it?
Just. No. This is some stupid brain rot on China. This is the interview of Tiding. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right. I don't want to play it because they're going to dig my channel if I try to play it. At least I think
what happened?
They're going to dig my channel.
You think so?
Okay,
because
let's try to play
it. Well, okay. You can maybe mute the audio. And is there an English subtitle on this? Yeah, there's English sub. So just play without the audio, because people don't understand Chinese anyway. So it's because okay. Just play it without the audio. You'll be fine, I think.
Okay, so that's good. All right, I'm going to read it out just in case the audience just can't necessarily see it, or they are watching or listening to it. Recently, I have been feeling very sad. This is what she's saying. And the students themselves have poor democratic qualities. And to be honest, that day I initiated a hunger strike that I understood there won't be any results. I knew a long time ago. Some people and some causes are destined to fail. I've always known this, but I kept struggling. By giving everyone a firm image, we can strive for victory. But in my heart, I understood it very well. The more I got involved, the sadder I became. I started to feel this back around April 20th. At the time, I want to say it now, but I was unwilling to say it because Chinese people should not curse Chinese people. But I have to say it. I have to say this. Sometimes I think you Chinese are not worth my struggle. I'm not worth dying for you. But I also think there are many in the movement, upright, conscientious students, workers, citizens, and intellectuals. Students are always asking, what are we going to do next? What can we do? I feel very sad in my heart. I can't tell them. In fact, what we are expecting is bloodshed. Force the government at the end, at a point when it has no other choice but to butcher its citizens. I think only then, when the square is awash in blood, then all Chinese people can truly open their eyes. What's wild about this? No bullshit. This is normal. Like, I know people, this may shock the conscience of some people, but what do they think Ukraine was? It was that. It just didn't work in this case.
There was also sniper on the roof at Maidan Square.
Yeah, because they needed bloodshed, which is her point, right? We need blood in the streets. We need people dying. We need to force the government to murder its citizens. That is the only way we can get, quote unquote, freedom. And that was exactly the same thing with Ukraine. They did it over and over again. They did it, back in 2004 with Lukashenko. They did it again under Yanukovych. And what was the point? Bloodshed. We need huge numbers of people in the square, and we need to force the government to respond by killing the population. The leaders of the protests never tell their population that they are basically lambs to the slaughter so they can get some kind of political objective.
You can argue that's probably happened in Europe. That's the during the Iranian protest. But I subtitled the Deng Xiaoping speech. I highly recommend you play that because I subtitled myself, and it's on my Twitter profile. And Deng Xiaoping gave his own verdict on the whole protest in Tiananmen. It's 2 minutes. It's about 2 minutes.
I got to be honest. I didn't entirely intend for this to be a Tiananmen Square episode just because I saw it first thing this morning. But I think this is beneficial and works because I don't want Marco Rubio, that asshole, to be the United States definitive conversational on this. I would prefer somebody who gives an honest accounting of what actually took place, positives and negatives. And I get the sense that that's what you've done. Okay, here it is. Okay, so this is Deng Xiaoping. And by the way, Carl, I thank you for this.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't, like I said, this wasn't the plan. I had planned to talk about.
It's fine. I think people should see this. Not many people, even Chinese people, have seen this.
This is a speech. And I'll read this out.
So he's speaking to the PLA commanders in this meeting. Yeah.
Okay, I'll read it out. It says, we had many injuries on our side, or injured on our side, even had some of our weapons taken away. Thugs had mixed with the crowd, hard to distinguish. This was a tough political test for our army. We passed the test, said emphatically. If we hadn't suffered those losses, if we had, as they said, used tanks to crush people, we would have caused confusion about right and wrong across the country. So I must thank those military commanders. Man, this is fascinating. For adopting the right attitude, even though our losses pains us. But that's how we win over people. This is fascinating, Carl. Like
he's talking about the tens, like a dozen PLA soldiers who were killed during the whole thing. And there's another. And then he talked about the nature of the protest itself. It's in the comments following that tweet. It's immediately after that. I in the reply
Okay,
I
here's the
posted.
other one.
Yeah. This is his verdict on the whole protest.
Okay. This, let's play it out.
It's
Okay. And I'll read this one out for the audience just in case they're listening also. The storm would have come sooner or later. This is due to global big political climate and China's small political atmosphere that decided this would happen. Basically saying this was inevitable.
yeah. He's talking
It
about the
won't change
protest.
due to people's will. No matter what we do, it will come. It's a matter of time. It will be a matter of magnitude. It comes now. It's more advantageous to us. Our first advantage is that a lot of old folks are still around. They support resolute action. They don't want chaos. They don't want chaos. Old comrades. Oh, I love it. Comrades. It says they experience many storms. They know seriousness of the situation. Even if some comrades don't understand now, eventually they will understand. Eventually they will realize that they should support this decision. It's obvious what's going on at first glance. It's clear. Their aim is to down with the Communist Party, down with socialism, two aims.
He repeated the same twice.
Yeah. He says they want to establish a total westernized civilization. This is a tough political test for our army. We pass the test.
This is before the other clip. This is what he said. So he actually said this is they want to establish a totally westernized so-called republic. That's what he said.
Yeah,
but that's so
color revolution.
Yeah, so from Deng Xiaoping's point of view, it's a color revolution, and this is why he took the decision that he made. And when he's talking about we lucky to have the old folks around, he's talking about himself and the other party elders, and he's saying like because we have been through a lot, so we know what's going on here, and the other comrades who may not understand our decision, he's talking about the political split at the time. At the very top of the Chinese leadership, he said, "Those comrades who don't understand their decision now, they will come around. They will understand later." And then he said, "This whole movement's aim is to bring down communist party and bring down socialism." He repeated that line twice. But anyway, so this is how Deng Xiaoping's personal view, verdict of the thing. I mean, but I leave it to your audience to decide. I think like the protests initially started organically because there were popular discontent that was building about inflation, about the official corruption. But I think it may have been co-opted toward the end, for some other purposes. Because only thing I can tell you is I can tell you about that sentiment shift that I noticed as a 13-year-old. I listen to the radio broadcast all the time from the college radio station, and suddenly it's like, whoa, did they just say down with the government? That escalated quickly. And so, yeah.
Carl, this has been a fantastic lesson. I've learned so much in this, and more to the point, one of the things that blows my mind that I didn't realize was its historical context. Like if you would put it this way, if you see Ukraine in the vacuum, you would think, hey, this is when they started color revolutions. And it's not that people don't have rational reasons for being upset with governments. All governments have issues that, dissidents in those governments. It's another thing for a protest that starts off legit and people say, hey, Now let's escalate the violence. Meaning you start off with a relatively decent reason, and then it spirals into infinity, where, as you point out, where it starts off as, hey, we don't like inflation and something is wrong. In this case, it goes to Xi Jinping must go. I was like, whoa, what? What? Student protests. Where did this come from? And as you point out, with the CIA and everything else. And then for her to say there needs to be blood in the streets. Yes, I know that is a typical tactic of protest. Force the government to respond, force the government to kill the population in order to inflame the population against the government. I get it. I just didn't realize that this is stuff, part of CIA playbook going all the way back to, meaning Ukraine wasn't the first, is my point. It's just fascinating. Great breakdown, as always. Carl Jha, you are the man. And I thank you for this, Carl. You have my appreciation. And just so the audience will know where to find you and your work. And by the way, Carl does historical context on the 5,000 years of Chinese history. So when Carl is stepping into this, he knows this stuff. Carl Jha is host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. And definitely check out his Twitter account. He has all sorts of interviews and everything else. And all of these videos will be on his feed. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk with the letter N. Subscribe to support the podcast on patreon.com/Silk and Steel. Carl, you have a damn good night, man. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Anytime.